Together, they moved forward with a shared sense of purpose. Brian's decision to focus on personal growth, to truly understand the weight of his responsibilities, was reflected in the strength of the companions who followed him. Each had a role to play in the battle ahead, and each was integral to the transformation of Rolling Greens into something greater. As they journeyed toward the Black Castle, Brian took time to speak with each of his companions, learning more about their pasts, their motivations, and their vision for the future. He had always been the one leading the charge, but now, with these companions by his side, he saw the value in shared leadership and understanding. They were no longer just allies, they were family. And as they approached the Black Castle, Brian's resolve grew stronger. He knew that this next step would not just be about protecting Rolling Greens or expanding his territory. It would be about creating a world where his companions, his people, and he could all grow together. Chapter: The Companions and the Beast Tamers Missions. As Brian continued his journey with his companions, his growing sense of responsibility as a lord and leader extended beyond just managing the city and protecting its inhabitants. He had brought along 12 supporters, primarily beast tamers, who were as skilled in handling creatures as they were in performing specialized tasks. These supporters would play a vital role in ensuring Rolling Greens continued to thrive, and Brian had outlined a series of important missions for them. The first task was a delicate one. Make sure there are no angels or gnomes left in the refugee camp, Brian instructed. They've been displaced, and we can no longer afford to have them remain without proper organization and care. The refugee camp, once a place of sanctuary, had grown chaotic and disorganized over time. Some of the displaced beings, especially the angels and gnomes, were unsettled by their status as refugees. Brian knew that for the future of Rolling Greens, they had to be integrated into the larger community or relocated to a more secure environment. With that mission in mind, the Beast Tamers would move swiftly to help guide the angels and gnomes, ensuring they were properly settled or sent to a more suitable location. Their expertise with creatures, be they magical or mundane, would be critical in helping facilitate this transition. The second mission focused on the potential wealth Rolling Greens could gain. Brian needed to strengthen the city's resources, and one such resource was spider silk. The city had already begun establishing workshops for crafting and weaving, and spider silk was a valuable commodity. Capture spiders for the silk weavers, Brian ordered. We need the finest silk to strengthen our economy and trade. The Beast Tamers were tasked with seeking out large, manageable spiders known for their silk production. Once captured, these spiders would be carefully bred and farmed to create a sustainable silk industry for Rolling Greens. The process would take time, but Brian knew that it was a step toward the city's growth and prosperity. The third mission was more exploratory in nature. I want you to explore the flooded barrows that have not yet been explored, Brian continued, his voice steady. There could be treasures hidden there, or perhaps threats we still need to understand. We can't afford to leave any stone unturned, especially with the history of this land. The flooded barrows, ancient burial grounds from long before Rolling Greens had been founded, were shrouded in mystery. Their submerged corridors and chambers were largely untouched, and Brian was determined to uncover what lay within. Whether there were remnants of an ancient civilization, artifacts, or dangerous creatures hidden deep within, the barrows were a vital piece of Rolling Greens' untapped potential. The Beast Tamers would navigate the treacherous waters, using their skills to handle whatever beasts or challenges they might face. The 12 Beast Tamers were eager to embark on these missions. Though their skills varied, they shared a deep connection with the land and its creatures, and each mission had been tailored to their strengths. Some were skilled in tracking and capturing, others in managing large beasts, and a few were particularly adept at navigating difficult terrain. Together, they would make these tasks a reality. With the missions outlined, Brian turned to his companions, who had been instrumental in the city's growth. This is just the beginning, he said, his voice carrying the weight of leadership. We'll strengthen Rolling Greens in every way through trade, through knowledge, and through exploration. The people of this land deserve the best, and it's our responsibility to make sure they get it. As the Beast Tamers set off on their respective missions, Brian felt a renewed sense of purpose. He was no longer just a conqueror or a leader of warriors. She was shaping the future of a city, of a people, and of an entire way of life. The challenges ahead were many, but he was ready. With his companions and supporters by his side, Brian knew that Rolling Greens would flourish, and that its influence would one day spread far beyond its walls. The future was unfolding before him, and it was full of promise. battlefield that would test them like never before. The first few days were marked by relentless fighting. The further they ventured, the more they encountered. The barrows, once sacred burial grounds, were now overrun with creatures resurrected by the ancient magics of the tombs. Others, simply predators drawn to the depths. From hordes of undead to massive hulking beasts, Brian and his companions were overwhelmed. Each battle seemed to last for hours, with no clear end in sight. They fought and fought, pushing back wave after wave of terrifying adversaries, and yet, the deeper they ventured, the more enemies came for them. For 5 long days, they slogged through these hellish battles. The fights were exhausting, their energy drained, but they could not stop. Every time they seemed to clear an area, the enemy would regroup, or worse, new horrors would crawl out of hidden chambers and flooded passages. In those first days, they would fight their way through the tunnels, only to rest for a few short hours before heading back into the fray. Roan, with his natural strength and unmatched resilience, was always in the front, his orichalcum shield raised against the oncoming tide of enemies, while his spear danced through the air, striking down beast after beast. Saber, his claws and sword carving through enemies with precise strikes, was a blur of fury, his feline instincts guiding him through each deadly encounter. Saphira's magic and might kept them steady, her sword flashing with celestial light as she struck down undead with holy precision. Cobb's rage was unyielding, his mace a devastating weapon, swinging down with the force of a storm, scattering enemies in all directions. Edison, ever the tactician, manipulated the environment, his force magic striking like a thunderclap, and his lightning-infused staff lighting up the barrows like a tempest. Meanwhile, Esther and her fire elementals carved paths of destruction, using fire as both a weapon and a barrier, scorching any creature that dared to approach them. But it wasn't just the enemies that wore them down. The oppressive atmosphere of the barrows was nearly as exhausting as the fights themselves. The air was thick with magic, some of it dark and ancient, others simply overwhelming in its strength. The constant dampness of the flooded chambers made their movements sluggish, and the eerie quiet between the battles left them on edge, never fully able to relax. The first days became a blur of exhaustion, of pushing forward only to be forced back, resting for mere moments before the next wave of creatures came charging in. The barrows were endless, a sprawling network of passages, tombs, and flooded chambers that seemed to stretch on forever. As the days turned to weeks, Brian's leadership began to shine even brighter. He was no longer just a leader by title, he was a commander of men and women, a protector of those who fought beside him. He saw the weariness in their eyes, but he never showed his own fatigue. He kept his composure, rallying them each time the enemy pressed them back. They followed his lead, fighting with everything they had, their loyalty to Brian deepening with every battle fought side by side. It took a month of this grueling, never-ending conflict, of fighting for every inch of the barrows, but they finally cleared the first third of the tombs. The progress had been slow, the battles fierce, but Brian and his companions had carved their way through the endless corridors, fighting with both valor and sheer determination. Every corner was a potential threat, but each victory was a step toward clearing the rest of the barrows. In that time, they had acquired valuable magical items relics from the ancient tombs, long forgotten by most. Some were weapons imbued with powerful enchantments. Others were magical artifacts that could shield or heal. Each item had its own unique properties, and Brian was careful to ensure they were distributed to his companions, empowering them for the next stages of their journey. Among the treasures they unearthed was an ancient territory shielded artifact of immense power, capable of protecting an area from external threats. It was a relic of great importance, one that would greatly benefit Rolling Greens when they returned. It was more than just a magical tool, it was a symbol of their perseverance and their victories in the barrows. But even as they gathered treasures and cleared the barrows, the toll of the legendary slog was evident. Brian and his companions had grown stronger, not just from the magical artifacts, but from the hardships they endured. They had come to rely on one another in ways they never had before. Their bond had been forged in fire, in blood, and in the unyielding will to survive. Each of them had changed in ways they couldn't yet fully comprehend, but the growth was undeniable. As they took a moment to rest after another fierce battle, Brian stood at the forefront, gazing at the endless depths of the barrows ahead. There was still much to be done. and the path forward would undoubtedly be just as grueling as the past month. But he knew one thing: he and his companions would face whatever came next together. They had fought their way through the depths of this cursed place, and they would continue to do so until the Barrows were nothing more than a distant memory. The fight was far from over,